Welcome to MegaBucks Radio. Conversations with successful entrepreneurs, sharing their tips and strategies for success. Real-world ideas that can put MegaBucks in your bank account. Here's your host, Nina Hirschberger.
Well, hello there, and welcome to today's show. I'm very, very excited because many times business coaches will teach people how to start a business, how to grow one. You know me, I love marketing. In fact, I've got some stories to tell in some of the upcoming episodes about how I helped a very small business owner really explode her business. But anyway, most of the time, they don't even think about or they're not preparing to sell that business. And unless you think you're going to live forever, there comes a period of time when you probably want to walk away from the business, or maybe you want to do something different. And so selling a business is really an important thing. So my guest today is Jessica Fialkovich, and I said I would probably mispronounce her name. Hopefully I did okay. Jessica is a business exit expert. So Jessica, we were talking before the show started. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nina, for having me on the show. So I was born and raised in New Jersey. I live in Colorado now, but grew up in a small southern New Jersey town. I was not raised to be an entrepreneur. So like we were talking about a little bit in the green room, my grandparents were entrepreneurs. And when my dad saw the ups and downs of owning a business throughout, a lifetime, he really encouraged me and my sisters to go into a steady corporate career. Like he always told us, like, do well in school, go get a good job, and make sure you have like good 401ks and save your money. But my grandparents actually owned a chain of pharmacies in the central part of New Jersey. And before that, my great-grandparents were in the bar industry. My great-great-grandparents were actually like in the bootlegging industry. So come from a long line of entrepreneurs, but just skip that generation of my dad.
And so did you become an entrepreneur or what happened then?
Yeah, so I did the whole corporate thing, right? So I graduated college, I started working in sports, and then I moved on into commercial real estate development. I moved into real estate development in the end of 2007, so just in time to catch the high before the Great Recession. So during that Great Recession, I was working for a company that was funded by Lehman Brothers that, as we all know now, started the whole hold of the economy in September of 2008. And it was really, that was the realization for me is everything I've been structuring my life around, this safe job, right, was actually not safe at all. I ended up just being another line item on a P&L that somebody in a big tower in New York eliminated in order to make sure that the company stayed afloat. And that really made me realize that the only person, the only control, the only safety I had was myself. And that at that time, I decided I was going to take control of my own life and my future and start my own business in the wine industry.
Did you say your husband worked for the same company as well? So you both got let go?
We both got let go, yeah. So we actually both worked for the same company and started our first business together. He's still my business partner to this day. So we've been working together for almost 15 years, and we started working together about like 6 months into our relationship. So at that company.
Well, congratulations, because sometimes that doesn't happen very well. So you went on to start a wine business. And then you sold it and started another business, as I understand?
Yeah, so we started in the wine industry. We started with a retail store and a tasting bar. We soon expanded to an e-commerce business. And then we also expanded into like a wine gifting type business. And we sold all of those businesses between 2012 and 2013. We held on to one more education piece of it that we didn't sell until 2015. But that was kind of my intro into selling businesses. And I really didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know you could sell a small business until I went through that process. And that's what introduced me to the exit planning side, the business brokerage side, and I really was intrigued with how that business worked and how I could help small business owners do the same thing I did. So I bought into my first business brokerage and practice in 2013.
And so you're still in that business? Is that the one that's the exit business?
Yes, yep. So still today, fast forward almost 10 years later, we'll celebrate 10 years beginning of next year. That business has grown. So we bought one business brokerage business, and now we're up to multiple offices in 3 different states. And we also have an exit strategy or exit consulting division of that business as well.
Okay, so you're perfect for my listeners. So let's talk about that small business person. Let's talk about the chiropractor. Let's talk about the cosmetic dentist. Let's talk about any of those kind of businesses. What's the first thing they should know when they call Jessica and Jessica's going to work with them? What should they know or what should they do?
Yeah, I think I'll answer in the phrase of the number one question I always get. Like the first phone call is like, no, what's my business worth? Like, how are we going to figure out what my business is worth and how am I going to sell it down the road? And I always tell people that, unfortunately, how the business for sale market works is people are very focused on the financial performance of a business. So first and foremost, that, what we're focused on is quantity of earnings, and maximizing that quantity of earnings really positions you to get the most for your business. So that's usually that first conversation. That's what we focus on. It's like, how do you maximize your earnings and show the potential value for buyers in the future?
So what you're saying about earnings, are you talking? So let's talk about the cosmetic dentist, for instance.
Yep.
So is the amount of money that he personally takes out of the business his paycheck? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about the top line sales coming into his business?
No, net profit. So when we're looking at our profit and loss statements as small business owners, we've got our top line of our gross revenue, and then we deduct our cost of sales and have gross profit, and then we have our overhead. But the bottom line, the net profit, which is after we've paid all of our expenses, after we've even paid ourselves, what we're looking at is that net profit that we're able to distribute to ourselves in terms of distributions or earnings. That's the number to be focused on.
Okay, so it's not. So let's say he pays himself $300,000 a year. That's his salary, but the net profits of his business, that bottom line net profit, is something beyond that. That's the number you want to know about as well.
Yeah, there is in the formula we take into consideration the payroll or the W-2 earnings of owners, but really what we're focused on, if we look at like a key performance indicator of how a business is doing, we want to focus on that net profit and make that as high as possible.
So let's say this cosmetic dentist, his practice is, and it could be a woman. I'm not trying to go back and forth, but so it's Dr. Smith's Cosmetic Dentistry. Is there a problem with his name being in the business, or does that not matter if you're going to sell a business?
Yeah, it does cause some issues in a lot of business sales. So one of the things that, and we can talk a little bit about the quality of the business too, because we talked about the quantity of earnings is important, but also the quality of the business, how the business is run will make it worth more or less. And one of the items in quality is we don't want the business to be dependent on the owner, right? We want a new owner to be able to step in and run that business. And sometimes if the previous owner's name is on the door, is on the website, is like their face is on the website, the business is like even positioned to be about them, that makes it very challenging for a new owner to picture themselves in those shoes without having some reservations about, well, the employees and the customers are really just doing business with that owner. It's not about the business, it's about that owner because his name is on the door. So it can really cause a challenge in limiting the value that someone pays for the business and also the transferability. There's a really interesting, this is a larger business, but Bobby Brown Cosmetics is a larger company that was acquired by Estee Lauder a number of years ago. This is a multi-billion-dollar transaction, but I use this as an example of people to think about this. And, what ended up happening in the transaction was that because everything was centered around her name, the company, the products, everything, she actually, the only solution they could come up with is she had to give up the rights to do business in her personal name. So it can be very complicated in order to transfer like that type of brand message and that brand's name if it's your personal name as well.
Okay, so that's part of the quality. So that's making sense. That's what I wondered about. So keep going as far as the quality of a business.
Mm-hmm. So if we keep focused, like really, the buyers have two big fears. Their first fear is that the customers are going to go away when the business is sold. And the second big fear is that the employees are going to go away. So if we keep focusing on that theme of then, if that's the case, we want to make sure that those people are doing business and working for the company, not for the owner. We talked about branding, right? The next is like the owner's role. Like, what is the owner involved in day-to-day operations? Are they involved in sales? Are they involved in account management? If we're talking about the cosmetic dentist, actually have a funny story in a related industry about that. But like, is he doing the actual procedures, right, in the cosmetic dentistry world? But the less and less the owner does in a day-to-day aspect of the business, the less the business is reliant on that person, the more the business is worth.
So that could be what you're probably, as you're working with their financials to make sure that you're getting those in order, you're also beginning to make sure that the owner starts stepping away. Is having procedures and operation manual, is that important?
Yes, it is, especially for, say, and look, it's hard for an owner to get out of all the day-to-day responsibilities, especially in a small business. But it's something that, our clients work to over time. Like, this is over multiple years. But if you do have to sell before you're out of all the day-to-day operations, those policy manuals, those processes really can help transfer the business to a new owner, especially for the owner's roles. Like, say the owner is still responsible for all the bookkeeping, right? That's something a new owner, a new buyer could take on fairly easily. But the more those processes and procedures are documented, the better it is. It also comes into play if your business has high turnover. So we see this for a lot of restaurants, right? There's a lot of turnover in restaurants, and it's unlikely that some of your servers or kitchen staffs are going to stay with you 5, 10, 15 years. Having really good documented processes and procedures for like hiring those people, onboarding them, training them, and then their actual day-to-day operations, and make sure those are followed quite closely, really helps increase the value and the efficiency of a company.
Okay. Anything else in the qualitative realm?
Yeah, so the last is what I call like de-risking the business. So we talked about the marketing of the business, we talked about the owner's role, and the last thing is making sure that the company is going to be stable when it gets handed off. So we talked a little bit about processes and procedures. The other thing is making sure that the business isn't too reliant on any one or two key stakeholders. And those stakeholders could be one or two key employees. It could be one or two customers. We talk about something, there's a term called customer concentration, when your business is dependent on one or two customers for a large chunk of the revenue, right? So reducing that over time. And the same thing goes on the vendor side, right? So if you are reselling a product or you're relying on specific vendors in your industry, making sure that's diversified as well. So, in terms of the qualitative side, making sure the business isn't branded after you or relying on you. Same with your role in the business. And the last is really de-risking that business, making sure the business doesn't depend on any one or two people, either as an employee, a customer, or a vendor.
So tell us some stories, Jessica. Tell us stories, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So we've been talking about this cosmetic dentist. So one of my most fun and extreme examples is in the dentist space. So this is a cautionary tale, we'll say. So I don't know if do you know how teeth are made, like manufactured teeth, like veneers? Have you ever heard of how they're made?
No, I have not.
So I had neither. That's kind of one of my favorite parts of my business. I get to learn all these random facts. But so if you want veneers, if you want new cosmetic teeth, you can choose to have your teeth manufactured by either a machine or manufactured by hand. So we had this client. Yeah, I know, right? Who knew? So we had this client once who was like the top tooth hand designer in the country, right? So my husband comes home and he says, hey, we got this new client. It's great. He's not involved in the business. He doesn't do any selling. He doesn't do any marketing. He doesn't even manage the staff. He only does one thing in the business. And he tells me, and he says, well, the only thing he does is he hand carves these teeth. And I'm like,
that
okay,
is the business.
That is the business, right? So now we're tasked with trying to go find another buyer who has the skill set of hand carving teeth. Well, I think you can guess how many buyers like that are in this world. Very, very few. But we were able to find somebody that was willing to purchase the business if that owner stayed on for, I think it was like a 5-year deal, right? He had to stay on for 5 years. And the gentleman at the time was in his 70s. Like, he wanted to retire, right? So we got the deal done, thankfully. It wasn't as much as he wanted, obviously, and there's some components of the deal that he did not like, including that 5-year employment agreement. And the first thing the buyer did, as he said, and this is an oversimplification of it, but he said to the seller, he said, okay, where did you learn how to hand carve teeth? And the seller says, oh, I went to X, Y, and Z Hand Carving Teeth Academy, right? So the buyer went down to that place, that academy, that university, and he found some graduates, and he started an apprenticeship program. And within like a year and a half, he had 6 people that had the same skill set as the seller did. So I think like the cautionary part of it, and the reason I use this story as an example a lot, is that I think there's a lot of things in our business that we always think is like unique to us. It's like a unique skill set that nobody else except us can do. But if in this world you can find people that can learn how to hand carve teeth in a year and a half and provide that the same value to the business as that owner did, we can kind of find the same thing in any of our businesses. So if that seller had done that, who knows what he would have been able to get for that business.
If he had come up with those other people and stuff, did he have to stay the 5 years, or after a year and a half, was he able to go?
He was able to exit earlier than the 5 years. Actually, it was a good kind of ending. The buyer and seller, and this is not typical in most deals, but the buyer and seller ended up really loving working together. So he stayed for the most of the 5 years because he was just really enjoying it. And I think really enjoying having those apprentices beneath him and rising to kind of a mentor role for them.
Interesting. No, that's a fascinating story. Do you have another one? I love hearing the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many. Let's see. Let's talk more about, we could dive into the processes one. I've got a good story about that. And I mentioned in the restaurant industry that it's really hard to find people to stay around a long time. And I know actually a lot of businesses are experiencing that right now. So we were working with a restaurant, and they were a finer dining restaurant, not like fine dining, but it wasn't like that, come and go and take out type stuff. It was more of like a family atmosphere, and they were in Italian cuisine, and they had a lot of turnover going on with their employees, and they were actually a large enough restaurant that they were attracting non-restaurant buyers, so more like investor types. And a lot of the big holdup was that they had this high turnover. And so we were trying to explain, like, this is something that happens in this industry. But really what won them over and got this restaurant, I would say what's a premium price point, is they had a systematic process of, like, if they posted a job for a new server, it was quite impressive. They would post a job with a new server, and they tracked the timing on this too. So from the time they posted the job, interviewed, hired, trained, and onboarded, in 10 days or less, that person was up and running at the same capacity and the same service level as the previous employee that had left. So when we were working on selling that business, that was a huge selling point, and it was we were able to convince some of those investor types, like, yes, this is a risk in the restaurant industry, but look how this business has solved this industry-wide problem. and it got them a premium, a higher sale price on the business than would have been typical.
Yeah, so they obviously tried to figure out and must have documented everything. So it was very easy to walk in.
Yeah, they did. It was like a whole system, and they had all the timing down. It was very, very impressive. And I guess another learning lesson is the same thing. Like that's a quite quick turnaround where they needed somebody up and running within less than 10 days. If they can do that, some of the positions that we need to backfill in our organizations, we're able to do it as well.
Yeah. I know one of the things we were going to talk about is how to prepare the business for sale in 1 year or less. That sounds like a challenge to me. So how do you, if somebody gives you a call and they say, I want it done in a year or less, what's the process? What's the steps?
Yeah. So the first thing we're going to focus on is what I call deal killers. So even if you get an offer on your business, about half of those offers are going to die in what's called the due diligence period. It's like the inspection period for a house. It's when the buyer gets to check and make sure everything is as it appears. And of those deals that die, almost all of them die for some type of financial records issue. So the very first thing we're going to do is make sure that the books and records, our profit and loss statements, our tax returns, our balance sheets, our bank statements, all tie together, and they're consistent for the past 3 years. So it's like the very first thing we do is try and clean that up and make sure it's not going to kill any deals. So instead of trying to get the most for selling our business, if we're in a short time frame, let's just make sure it sells first. So that's the first thing. And other deal killer things that we'll focus on is if there's any legal issues in the business, things like that. And then if we jump to the quality side, we take a look at that owner's role and we say, hey, what are we doing as owners that we can eliminate from our plates right now without it adding a lot of cost to the organization? And if there's anything there, great, we'll get it off our plates. For everything else, we're going to document what our role is. Like we talked about, the processes and procedures. Document what we're doing in the business. So that way we at least have some type of training and transition plan to replace ourselves with the new owners. So those are really the top two things to do if you have a year or less to prepare.
Okay. And so it must be doable then.
Yeah, it is doable. More time is always better. Like I joke that the best day to start planning the sale of your business is the day you open it. The next best day is today, right? If you're just hearing this for the first time. Yeah. In general, when we're looking at selling businesses, a buyer is going to look back 3 to 5 years. So they're going to say, what's happened for the last 3 to 5 years? So if we could look into the future and we had a crystal ball and we knew we were going to sell 3 to 5 years in advance, then that's the amount of time we should plan for the business sale. But oftentimes, especially with small business owners, we don't have that magic 8 ball. We don't know when we're going to sell. So the better plan is to start trying to run your business every day like it could be sold any day.
Yeah, no, that's terrific advice. I mean, would you say that if they had that view, that they were going to sell, say, in 3 to 5 years, that any business would be saleable?
Yes. Yeah, I truly believe that every business is saleable. It just depends on how much it's worth, right? Not every business is going to be worth $10 million, but every business has some sort of value to it. And the way we get the most for that value is preparing in advance. I was talking to a group of entrepreneurs last week, and they asked me, like, what's the secret? Like, why do some people get more than other people? And there's a lot of different reasons, but it boils down to one thing I've seen consistently with the entrepreneurs that get the most for their small businesses is those are the owners that run their business like it's going to be sold every single day for the entire length of the business.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. Is there a number, a factor? You talked about the net profits, the net, is it a times a factor? Is a thumbnail for what it might sell for? Yeah,
so the value of a business is a multiple of earnings. So, and typically we use a multiple of an earnings metric called EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So if you have $100,000 in EBITDA, it's 100,000 times whatever that multiple is. The average multiple across all industries for businesses that do, say, less than 30 million in revenue is 3.5. But those multiples range really widely between industry and size of businesses and things like that.
Interesting. Let's flip over. Let's say I want to buy a business. Do you have tips for those people who are thinking about buying a business?
Yeah, I do. And it's also another side I'm super passionate about because I started a bunch of businesses and then I realized, hey, you can buy businesses too. And oftentimes over time, buying a business can be less expensive than doing the startup game. So the first, I'd say, more like mythbuster than tip I have for people that are buying businesses is you don't have to have all the money to buy the business. It's kind of like getting a mortgage on a house, right? I talk to a lot of buyers and they say, oh, well, I only have $100,000. Like I can only buy a $100,000 business. And actually $100,000 could get you through financing and different mechanisms, could potentially purchase you $1 million business. So the first kind of myth and tip I say is look at all the different financing options to really know what you have available for you before you go searching for businesses based on size.
I'm sorry, there was a time when you kind of went away. Let's go back. So I've got 100,000 and I could potentially buy $1 million business. What did you say past that?
Oh, the first tip I always say to people is first assess what financing options you have available for buying a business before you even start searching.
Are there certain kinds of businesses that are better to buy than others?
I think it really is dependent on the business owner, right? So a lot of business owners that I particularly work with are buying businesses that will enhance their current business. We call it growth through acquisition. So they'll look at competitors or businesses that are similar to theirs. For first-time buyers, I always say, figure out what you like to do. And it might be a career that you are already in. It might be something that you aspire to do, but not just the industry, not hey, I want to just go into fitness. What do you like to do? Do you like to do marketing? Do you like to do sales? And then be open to a number of different industries, but look for that business where you can apply your unique skill set in marketing or sales and amplify that business even further.
So did you get into the wine business because you like wine?
I liked wine. I'm like you. I like marketing, right? So I saw an opportunity for it was right at the beginning of selling wine online, and my background was online marketing, and so I saw an opportunity to take this luxury wine market, these luxury wine products that we're selling online, and do some digital marketing with them to grow the business pretty quickly. So that's what I liked about that business. Wine was great, but it was just another product or service.
I always think of Gary Vaynerchuk when I think of online wine selling.
Yes, we were right at that time with him. Gary was the first on. We were one of the first to sell luxury products. So most of our wines cost about $500 or more per bottle. But it was pretty quick after Gary V became Gary V that every wine seller in the country tried to go online. So
yeah, he knocked it out. Well, I'm looking at the clock, and we are time to wrap up. Jessica, this was amazing. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for sharing so much. If somebody is interested in talking more, how should they get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we set up a landing page. It's exitfactor.com/podcast. You can reach out to us via email on that page. And also there's also a bunch of links to our social media, so you can follow us there too.
And I think on that page you might have a special offer for the listeners.
Yep. We do have a free assessment. So if you want to find out if your business is sellable, you can complete our free assessment there as well. And then there is a code on there for $500 off on any of our services. So if you want a business valuation or you want to partake in some of our consulting services, you can get $500 off.
Well, that's a very generous offer. And this has been a fabulous interview. So I want to thank you for being my guest today. Who knows? I think I should have you back on in a future one. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
This is Nina Hirschberger saying go out and make it an amazing day.
Thank you for listening to MegaBucks Radio with Nina Hirschberger. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or to listen to past episodes, visit megabucksradio.com.